When her children were banned from their grandmother's birthday party for being too much, single mom Carmela didn't beg for inclusion, she built a culinary movement. What began as one night of heartbreak turned into a viral uprising of love, justice, and tiramisu. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Carmela Martinez's modest two-story home in Maplewood, New Jersey. Outside, kids on scooters zipped along the sidewalk, their laughter echoing faintly. Inside, Carmela sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched birthday card in her hands. It was for her mother, an elegant card with gold script and a flower embossed on the front, but the words inside suddenly felt hollow. She had dressed carefully, wearing the blue silk blouse her mother once complimented, and soft curls framing her face. Her children, Emma and Lucas, ages 8 and 6, had been excited all morning. Emma wore her special occasion braid, her hair meticulously plaited on her own, while Lucas had picked his favorite superhero socks and kept asking if Grammy would have chocolate cake. But none of that would matter. "Mom, are you sure we can't come?" Emma asked again, her voice small but hopeful. Carmela knelt down and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Grammy said it's a grown-ups only party. I promise, we'll do something special soon, just the three of us." Lucas frowned and crossed his arms, bouncing slightly on his toes. "But I wanted to show her my drawing. One of her gardens." Carmela's heart broke a little more. "I know, baby. She'd love to see it next time." She handed the kids over to Jessica, their regular babysitter, with extra snacks and their favorite board games, then stepped out into the cool evening air. The drive to her mother's house in Princeton took an hour, and the silence in the car felt heavier with every mile. She replayed her mother's words from earlier that week. "Let's keep it just adults this time, Carmela. You know how overwhelming parties can be." Now, standing in the foyer of her childhood home, Carmela felt the familiar ache of being the outsider. The party was already in full swing. Elegant guests milled about with glasses of Chardonnay, classical music floating in the background. The dining room was set impeccably fine china, polished silverware, and a towering arrangement of white roses at the center. Carmela took her place at the long table, offering polite smiles. But when the door opened and Michael strolled in, everything shifted. Her brother wore his usual smug expression, his wife, Candace, beside him in a sleek designer dress. Their 3 children, ages 10, 7, and 5, burst into the room like royalty. Each carried a perfectly wrapped gift. The room erupted in cheer. "Grammy," they cried. Their grandmother beamed. "Oh, my darlings." Carmela's hands clenched under the tablecloth. She caught her mother's eye. "Mom, I thought this was a grown-ups only party." Her mother barely looked at her. "Michael's kids are different, Carmela, they're special. I'm sure you understand." "I don't," Carmela replied, voice low but firm. "Emma and Lucas are just as special." Michael chuckled as he adjusted his tie. "Come on, Carm. You know your kids can be a handful, she repeated. "They're energetic. You wouldn't want them to get overwhelmed." "They weren't overwhelmed," she said, rising from the table. "They were heartbroken." She looked at the photos lining the walls. Michael's kids featured in nearly every one, front and center. Her children, present only on the periphery. "I'm leaving," she announced, grabbing her purse. "Carmela, don't be dramatic," her mother sighed. "No, I'm going to spend the evening with my children, where we're truly appreciated." Outside, the cold evening wind hit her cheeks like a wake-up call. She slid into the driver's seat and stared out at the darkening sky. Her mind whirled with emotion, rage, sadness, guilt. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Then she found it. Antonio DeMarco. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, but she remembered his warm smile, his obsession with herbs, and how he always dreamed of opening a restaurant. She hit call. 2 rings. Then, "Tony DeMarco here." "Tony, it's Carmela Martinez." From Ridgewood High, a beat of silence. Then Carmela. "Wow, it's been forever. How are you? I need a favor. And maybe a little magic." She explained the situation, voice trembling with vulnerability. Tony didn't interrupt. Finally, he said, "Bring them. Right now. I've got an idea." The drive back felt lighter. Carmela walked into her home to find Jessica trying to cheer up the kids. Emma looked up, tear tracks visible on her cheeks. "You're back early," Lucas said. "Did Grammy miss us?" Carmela knelt between them. "How would you two like to go on an adventure?" Emma's eyes narrowed. "What kind?" Carmela showed them her phone screen. Tony, In one of his cooking videos, flambeing pears with a dramatic flair, Chef Tony. Lucas gasped. Better, Carmela smiled. We're going to his restaurant. Tonight, he wants your help. Montclair glowed in the twilight as they arrived at Giardino. The upscale Italian restaurant radiated warmth from within. The kids clutched each other's hands as they stepped inside. Tony waited at the entrance in his chef's whites, a grin spreading across his face. The Martinez family, he said. Come in, we're about to make some culinary history. Tony knelt to greet the kids, who looked starstruck. I hear we've got some up-and-coming chefs here, he said. Lucas puffed his chest. I make the best scrambled eggs. Emma held up her notebook. I grow herbs on our windowsill. Tony's face lit up. You're already ahead of the curve. They were led to a private table with a clear view of the kitchen. The air smelled of rosemary, garlic, and baking bread. A tasting menu arrived, sophisticated, yet child-friendly. Emma identified basil in the pasta sauce. Lucas raved about the polenta fries. Then Tony returned, holding 2 white aprons embroidered with gold lettering. Giardino Jr. Chef, ready to help me with dessert? He asked. Lucas jumped up. Yes. Emma nodded shyly. I'll fold the moss. Inside the bustling kitchen, staff members welcomed them with playful bows and high fives. Tony guided them with patience and joy. Lucas counted the ladyfingers perfectly. Emma folded the cream with precision. When Carmela took their photo, her children glowing in the kitchen's light, she didn't feel like an outsider anymore. She felt like someone finally walking into the place they were always meant to be. The kitchen at Giardino buzzed with activity, but to Emma and Lucas it felt like magic. Stainless steel counters gleamed under the bright lights, the sizzle of pans and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables played like music, and every corner of the space hummed with a quiet purpose. It was their first real evening in a professional kitchen, and they were not just guests, they were part of the team. Tony crouched next to Lucas, guiding his small hands as he piped mascarpone cream onto the layered ladyfingers. Just like that. See the swirl. Gentle pressure. You've got it. Lucas's face was pure joy. I'm doing it. Emma, beside them, measured cocoa powder with a precision that made Tony nod approvingly. She had her notebook open to a clean page, where she sketched notes and doodled ideas for herb pairings. Carmela stood near the edge of the kitchen, watching her children transform. The shadow of the birthday party had lifted, replaced with something unexpected belonging, and something else. Tony, he moved with the confidence of someone who had found his place in the world, but he wasn't arrogant. He listened, he taught, he laughed with her kids like he'd known them forever. And when his eyes met hers across the kitchen, there was something unspoken there. After the tiramisu was completed and stashed in the fridge to chill, Tony led them all upstairs to the rooftop herb garden. I grow most of our greens here, he said, gently plucking a sprig of mint and handing it to Emma. Smell that. Emma closed her eyes, smiling. That's chocolate mint. Tony's eyes widened. Impressive. Lucas leaned over a rosemary bush and sniffed. This smells like the chicken. Carmela laughed. Your palate's evolving. They spent almost an hour exploring the rooftop, the New Jersey skyline glowing behind them. When they returned, the kids' tiramisu was plated and ready to serve. The entire kitchen staff had gathered around, presenting, Tony declared theatrically, Emma and Lucas's Giardino Jr. Chef tiramisu. Applause broke out. Cameras flashed photos, taken for the restaurant's Instagram. The kids beamed. Tony turned to Carmela. I hope you don't mind, our social media manager wants to post this. I think it's time our guests met the next generation of chefs. Of course, Carmela said, overwhelmed. Tony hesitated. Actually, there's more. We've been wanting to start a weekend cooking class for kids, but not just any kids, ones like Emma and Lucas, the ones who get told they're too much or too sensitive. I want them to feel welcome here. Like this is their kitchen too. Her throat tightened. You're serious? Very. I want you involved, too. As a partner. You know how to tell stories. You know families. You've lived this. Carmela blinked. You're asking me to help run a program with you. Not just run it, shape it, build something that lasts. Lucas tugged at Tony's sleeve. Will we be able to make chocolate stuff every weekend? Tony grinned. Every weekend, my man. That night, Carmela posted a single photo. Her kids in aprons, dusted with cocoa, joy written across their faces. The caption, sometimes, the best parties aren't the ones you're invited to. They're the ones you create. The response was instant. Dozens of likes, comments from friends, neighbors, And even a few family members at the party she'd left. From her cousin Sophia, "Oh my God, is that Tony DeMarco? This is amazing." From her Aunt Diana, "Your mother is fuming. Everyone's talking about this, not the party. Maybe she learned something." And from her brother, Michael, "Nice stunt." She ignored it. Instead, she replied to Tony's late-night text, "Can we meet tomorrow to plan this thing?" He responded instantly, "Absolutely. Let's light the fire." The first few weeks of the Giardino Junior Chef program passed in a whirlwind. Sunday mornings transformed into Carmela's favorite time of the week. The kitchen was filled with squeals of delight, the clatter of mixing bowls, and the delicious scent of fresh herbs and baked goods. Emma and Lucas flourished. Emma led a short segment on identifying herbs and began preparing her handouts. Lucas became a charismatic presence in the kitchen, charming everyone with his energy and humor as he demonstrated piping techniques. Tony and Carmela worked side by sessions, organizing logistics, and building a framework that could expand beyond Montclair. The spark between them, once subtle, now simmered just below the surface. Late-night planning meetings often bled into shared stories and laughter over leftover pastries. The community response was overwhelming. Parents flooded the inbox with applications. Journalists requested interviews. The local PTA invited Carmela and Tony to speak about inclusive education. A regional cooking magazine featured a photo of Emma dusting cocoa on tiramisu, accompanied by the caption, "A new generation of chefs." But with attention came friction. One afternoon, a sharply worded email arrived. It was from Richard Belmore, a wealthy restaurateur and donor who had recently contributed to Giardino's expansion fund. "While I admire the concept of culinary inclusion, I'm concerned about the optics. Some children featured in your program appear ... overly energetic. This may not align with Giardino's image as a fine dining institution." Carmela stared at the screen, heart pounding. The subtext was clear. He meant Lucas. Tony looked furious. "This is garbage. We're not watering down the program because someone's uncomfortable with kids being kids. It gets worse," Carmela said, pulling up a new browser tab. "Belmore's law firm is the one Michael works for." Tony swore under his breath. "This is calculated. They're trying to choke the program from behind the scenes." Carmela's chest tightened. "We're doing something real here. And they hate it because it's not under their control." She took a deep breath and made a decision. "I want to go public. About everything. The favoritism, the exclusion, the reason this program exists in the first place." Tony looked at her for a long moment. "You sure? Once it's out, there's no going back." Carmela nodded. "Let them come. We're not backing down." The blog post went live the next morning. "When your children aren't welcome at the family table" was raw, honest, and blistering. Carmela described the birthday betrayal, the years of exclusion, and the night they found belonging in your kitchen. She wrote about Lucas's boundless energy, Emma's herb obsession, and how both had been treated as less than by their own family. The post included photos of their first cooking night, the rooftop herb garden, and a final line that struck a nerve. "We didn't need a seat at their table. We built our own." The post exploded. Within 48 hours, it had been shared over 10,000 times. Comments poured in, parents, educators, chefs, therapists, echoing the same sentiment. "Thank you." TV reporters showed up outside Giardino. The story was featured on the evening news under the headline, "Kitchen of Belonging." Meanwhile, Michael called multiple times. Carmela declined each one. Her mother sent a letter, handwritten, formal, and cold. "You've embarrassed this family. If you cared about your children, you wouldn't exploit them for attention." Carmela folded the letter neatly and slid it into the recycling bin. That Sunday, the kitchen was fuller than ever. Kids wore aprons bearing their names, families lingered longer, and a new buzz was in the air. One mother whispered tearfully to Carmela, "My son has ADHD. This is the first time someone told him he's not too much." Tony called an impromptu meeting with the staff. "I've made a decision," he said. "We're turning this into a nonprofit, the Giardino Foundation. We'll take donations, offer scholarships, and expand into other restaurants." "And Carmela," he turned to her, eyes steady, "I want you as the co-founder." Carmela felt breathless. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." He extended his hand. She shook it, eyes locking with his. In that moment, it wasn't just a business partnership, it was a vow to protect a vision. That night, they sat alone in the rooftop garden, watching the stars. "You know," Tony said softly, I dropped out of culinary school. They said my ideas were too unstructured. I didn't fit. You fit here, Carmela whispered. He reached across the table and took her hand. So do you. The first official Giardino Foundation event was held under a clear spring sky. Bunting made from recycled aprons fluttered in the breeze. Long tables were arranged in the community garden behind the restaurant, and the scent of baking focaccia filled the air. More than 50 families had RSVP'd, and the children wore their junior chef jackets like armor, symbols of a place where they finally belonged. Carmela stood near the welcome sign, clipboard in hand, helping organize the stations. Emma handed out hand-painted herb labels while Lucas directed kids to the chocolate piping tent. Tony, as always, moved among them like a conductor, keeping pace, lifting spirits, and lending a helping hand wherever needed. Mom, Emma said, tugging her sleeve. We just had 3 new kids sign up for the summer classes. One of them's never even cracked an egg before. Perfect. Carmela smiled. That means they'll learn everything fresh. The event flowed with the rhythm of laughter, discovery, and shared purpose. It was more than cooking, it was healing. But not everyone was ready to celebrate. At the edge of the garden, Carmela spotted her mother. She stood apart, dressed in a beige suit, looking both out of place and uncomfortable. Carmela's heart skipped. Did you invite her? She whispered to Tony. He shook his head. She RSVP'd herself. Said she wanted to see what all the noise was about. Carmela took a breath and walked toward her. Mom, she said. You came. I had to see it for myself, her mother replied. Everyone keeps talking about this program, about how it's changing lives. Her voice held skepticism, but also something softer. Lucas ran past, holding up a chocolate-dipped strawberry. Grammy, want one? Her mother hesitated. Then, slowly, she bent down and took it. Thank you, Lucas. He grinned and raced away. Her mother stood again, brushing her fingers on a napkin. He's calmer than I remember. Carmela's eyes didn't waver. He's not calmer, he's accepted. There's a difference. Silence stretched between them. Emma's teaching a class in the herb tent, Carmela added. She's built a curriculum. Her mother looked toward the tent, where Emma stood confidently holding a basil plant, surrounded by a ring of younger children. She's a natural, her mother said quietly. She always has been. You just didn't want to see it. The words hung in the air. Not cruel, not angry, just truth. I didn't know how to handle them, her mother admitted. They weren't like Michael's kids. I thought if I kept things easier, simpler, it would keep peace. It didn't, Carmela said. It made them feel invisible. Her mother blinked fast. I was wrong. Carmela nodded. I know. They stood in the quiet for a moment longer, the sounds of the event carrying around them like a hymn. Then her mother said, Is it too late for me to learn? Carmela gestured toward the open table. Take a seat. Emma's about to teach how to blend herbs for homemade pizza dough. You might learn something. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Belmore's office. But it wasn't a cease, it was an apology. His board had reviewed the foundation's mission, and his granddaughter, diagnosed with autism, had joined one of the weekend classes. He enclosed a donation check for $25,000 and a request. Could Giardino Foundation consult on an inclusive dining space he was building in NYC? Carmela read the letter twice before passing it to Tony, who chuckled. Told you. Keep the heat on long enough, and the cold melts. By midsummer, the junior chef program had expanded to 4 satellite restaurants, with Carmela and Tony traveling weekly to train staff and design curriculum. Emma's herb kits were now sold at local farmers markets, while Lucas had landed a mini-segment on a kids' cooking channel, titled Cooking with Lucas, Chaos Meets Chocolate, and Carmela. She was exactly where she belonged. A thriving foundation, raised to celebrated young chefs, and found love with a man who saw the brilliance in others where the world saw flaws. At the final summer banquet, the foundation unveiled a new cookbook. The title, Family Made from Flame. Each recipe was paired with a story of a child who found confidence, healing, or joy through food. For every child who was ever told they were too much or not enough, you are perfectly seasoned. And for the parents who kept believing, you built more than a kitchen. You built a place to belong. As Carmela stood beside Tony, watching Emma present a demo, and Lucas twirl with frosting on his nose, she felt the pulse of everything they had created. The betrayal that once fractured her heart had become the recipe for something enduring, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's joyful, generous, and served with cocoa powder on top.